evening. E-bikes. Now, why should you listen to me? Well, I did spend many years in the mountain bike industry at quite a high-end manufacturer, and I did everything from warehousing and worked myself up to research and development. So I know my way around a bike. So when I was given this, now just make it clear, I have no skin in the game. This is the Glide bike. It wasn't supplied to me by them. I didn't buy it with my own money. It was actually a gift from a friend. So I have no vested interest. I'm just going to tell you what I think, not necessarily about this model, but e-bikes in general. Now, why have an e-bike? Well, personally, for myself, obviously, I'm getting older. I'm not as fit as I was. I have other health conditions. One of the main things, certainly for the cycling point of view, is damage to my joints, on my knees and things like that. Riding an ordinary bike, yes, I can still do it, but I can't go that far without it being uncomfortable. Having the power, the assistance to your riding makes a big difference. First time out on this, I went out, 20-mile ride, no problem at all. That's the difference. There's no way I could have done that on an ordinary bike, especially after being away from bikes for quite a few years. Now, the things to look for. This is, not being nasty, a low-end bike. As far as electric bikes are concerned, you can pay thousands and thousands. These, I think, are around £800, which I think is quite good value, because a decent ordinary mountain bike is going to be that and upwards. And it is essentially the same thing. It's got the same sort of frame, it has to have bars, a seat, pedals, etc, etc. But of course you've got the battery, you've got the drive motor, all added on. So for £800, I think it's actually quite a lot of bike for that money. Things to look out for. Now this, like I say, is e-bikes in general, not just this model. When you're talking at this sort of price point, front suspension, it's never going to be that good. Compared with proper mountain bike front suspension, it's never going to be that good. Unless you're spending big money where they're going to put proper forks on it, sometimes full suspension on it, don't expect too much. The front forks, yes, they will work. If you're on an uneven path sort of thing, they will take the worst of that shock out. What they don't have is any sort of dampening in them. So although when you hit a bump, it will compress, it will take the biggest amount of shock out, there's nothing to stop the return. Normal riding, you don't really notice it massively, apart from the noise. They do clunk when they lock out. Where I notice it more is if I'm going through, should we say, on an off-road situation where there's, I don't know, a small tree, a rock or something in a path that I want to hop over. You automatically pop up the front end, so you're not running straight into it. As you pop it up, there's this thunk as it locks out. There's no damping resistance. It's like running a car with just springs and no dampers or shock absorbers. So yes, the front end works. It's not brilliant. This one does have the lockout feature. I tend to have it locked most of the time, so it's just a rigid front end. It rides fine. Big tyres, as long as you're not running at high pressures, will absorb enough. That's my thinking. Other things we can think about. This one's got the hand throttle. Now, having a throttle on one of these is technically a no-no, UK spec at least. They only allow you power pedal assist up to 15 miles an hour. A lot of them you can de-restrict. I'm saying nothing at this point. But 15 mile an hour assistance with your pedalling. Because it's got the hand throttle, I can not pedal and just use the throttle, and again take me up to 15 miles an hour-ish. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. I tell you when I find it the most handy is actually when you're starting. If you're on the road at a set of traffic lights or something like that, rather than having to, you know, get up to your balance, stick some effort in, power it off the line to get yourself moving, you can actually grab the hand throttle, gives you that push momentum, catch it with the pedals, and you're up to a decent speed straight away. I don't use the hand throttle a lot, but every now and again it is handy. Also, when I'm coming home, the steps outside my house, a flight of steps to come up. Obviously I'm not riding the bike, I'm pushing it. The fact that you can pop the front wheel onto the steps, use the hand throttle, and it sort of will help you up the steps is handy. So a hand throttle, legally, no, in the UK. Is it worth having? Yes. Just be careful how you use it. Let's just say that. Plenty of gears, in as much as I think it's got a 7-speed block at the back, 3 chain rings at the front, 21 speed or whatever it is. I don't really use them. With the added power, you don't need the gears as much. I tend to leave it in top gear at the back, middle ring at the front. It will go everywhere, easy enough from a standing start, using the throttle. If I'm going a longer distance on the flat, I will skip up to the front big chain ring. So then you're pedaling slower. You don't get so tired. But for certainly commuting to work, skipping through the park, all that sort of thing, middle ring, top gear at the back, I can pedal at a comfortable cadence. Yes, that's its technical term. Comfortable cadence at the 15 mile an hour power limit. This has disc brakes on it, as a lot of bikes will nowadays. Now, most of the bikes at the lower end of the price point will have cable operated brakes, which these are. Now, this is nothing new. I can remember cable operated disc brakes probably 20 plus years ago when they first came out. They were pretty rubbish then. They're pretty rubbish now. It's a sales gimmick. Don't get caught up with the whole disc brake thing. If you have disc brakes, they need to be hydraulic to be an advantage. The old-fashioned V-brakes, as we used to call them, where you just have the 2 arms and the brake pads on the rim, they're way more powerful than the cable-operated discs on here. These brakes are barely adequate. For normal riding, commuting, that sort of thing, yeah, they're fine. But if you are actually pushing on at a rate of knots or an emergency situation, they're not quite enough, to be perfectly honest. So discs operated by cables, don't expect too much. Discs need to be hydraulic, otherwise they are a waste of time. Simple as that. The only other thing I can think of advising you on, the weight. Now, this is pros and cons. Now, you've obviously got a huge battery pack, a motor in the rear. This is all adding weight. It is a bloody lump of a thing. Now, I notice this when I want to go off, you know, a fair distance, maybe do some riding in a nice woodland or something like that. To get there, I stick this in the back of my pickup truck, drive to wherever, park up, pull the bike out and go and do the ride. That's fine, but to lift this into the back of my pickup truck, you know you're picking it up. It's not light. The plus point of that extra weight, when you're riding normally, on normal roads, normal paths, that sort of thing, it does feel quite, how can I put it, positive and secure. Now, many years ago, I was dealing with high-end cross-country race bikes, which were ultra light. They really, really were stupid light. I've built titanium frame bikes and things like that in the past, and they were great for the cross-country guys that were doing it professionally. Of course, like every gram counts when you're in pro sport, a bit like F1. But these really light bikes, they're really twitchy. They're really responsive, but really twitchy. And they can sort of get you in trouble a little bit sometimes. So for normal riding, the extra weight actually gives you quite a sense of security, and it just rides nicely. I suppose it's a little bit like riding in a really, really cheaply lightweight made car compared with driving a Volvo. The Volvo's not exciting, but it's big, solid, dependable. That's sort of like the difference. So I wouldn't be put off by the weight unless you live in a flat and you have to pick it up and carry it up the stairs. So yeah, there is many pros and cons to having an electric bike. Range-wise, this particular model, depending whether you're climbing hills or whether I'm down on the seafront where it's dead flat, 60 miles to 100 miles, potentially. Again, depending on whether I'm pedalling, so it's pedal assist, or I'm using a throttle where it's obviously all battery and the lazy git's doing nothing. So yes, there is pros and cons, very much pros and cons. But to be honest, for this particular model, the Ellie Glide, which is probably one of the cheapest on the market, I don't know, I'm not big into electric bikes, I think this is very good. For about, I don't know how much they are, about £800, £750, something like that. You get quite a bit of bike for the money. Like I said, any decent mountain bike is going to be that figure and upwards. The fact that you get, you know, a big battery, a motor, the little LED jobby at the top with your speed and battery level and trip computer and all that stuff built in, and of course it has a LED light on the front, very good headlight actually, it's very, very bright, all running off this main battery. You get all that, I can justify that sort of money if I was buying it. So yeah, there's my thoughts on electric bikes. They're not for everyone. A lot of people say, well, why do you want an electric bike? It's just lazy. For some people, maybe. But for also some people like me, which are older, injuries, ill health, that sort of thing, it still allows you to enjoy cycling with just a little bit of help. So I wouldn't knock it, to be honest. I wouldn't knock it. I quite like this. I often ride it to work because it just makes more sense. I can actually get to work cutting cross country through the park as fast on this as I can using my truck driving on the roads, especially if the traffic's bad. And my truck is currently in the garage having its brake pipes replaced, so I'll be on this in the morning. And yes, the weather forecast is rain. Great. That, I suppose, is the only downside. You can't beat being in a car, can you really? But for what it is, I think it's pretty cool. Any questions about this particular model, the Ellie Glide one? Fine, let me know. I can answer, hopefully, for you. Or about bikes in general. But bear in mind, I've been out of the industry about 20 years now, so I'm not bang up to date. But for general sort of information about mountain bikes, their setup, tyre pressures, this sort of thing, I can probably help you out. So there, bit of an odd video for me, not really relevant to the channel, but I thought it might be worth saying and interesting to some people. I'll catch you at the weekend.